welcome to Let's Talk. My name is Dr. Mike Mills, and I am going to be guiding us through tonight's Let's Talk session. And this is our Health Pros Live Q&A. I am so excited. I just love these. We do these the last week of every month, and I just think they bring such value. And what an exciting week. We're heading into Thanksgiving, really just a holiday based on gratitude, and I love that. But I have some amazing people with me tonight, Megan and Donnie, and they have been practicing nurse practitioners for many years. Megan is a doctor of nursing practice and a family practice nurse practitioner. She has been worked in the field of cardiology for over 12 years now. Donnie is a pediatric nurse practitioner and has done some work in oncology. And she actually designed like a weight management program for kids in one of her careers. And so I just think they're going to bring a wealth of knowledge this evening. It's going to be amazing. So what we'd love for you to do is at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. We would love for you to start putting your questions in there, right? You could have a lot of questions about metabolic health, what that is, how our program specifically addresses issues related to metabolic health. And so as we get rolling here tonight, you can always put information in the chat, but it's nice to just click on that Q&A button and you can put your question in there and we'll start addressing those this evening as we get going. But Megan, I just thought we'd start with you. I know you have an amazing journey into Optavia, and I'd just love for you to share, what is it about this program that has drawn you to use this to help your clients, your patients? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, there sure are. And I just think it's great to be here with all of you tonight. And it's interesting that Donnie and I represent kind of the two leading causes of death in this country and really in the world is cardiovascular disease and cancer, which both have a root in metabolic health. So I just think that it's so great to share this program. My metabolic health story really started as a brand new cardiovascular ICU nurse. I was young, I was in my 20s. I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am today. And when I first discovered that I had the beginnings of metabolic disease already, was when I was working at the hospital and I sent a sample of my blood to the lab to just get a cholesterol test. I had never had it checked before. And the lab called me immediately and said, "This is not yours. You're tricking me. This is one of our cardiac patients." And I was like, "Oh no," because it really was mine. My triglycerides were high, my good cholesterol, which is the HDL, was low, and my blood pressure was running high, and I had that abdominal adiposity at 40 pounds heavier. So I made a commitment then and there to try to turn things around, and I did. It was a struggle. But then later on in my career, as I became a nurse practitioner and focused in cardiovascular health, I wanted to help other people achieve that same kind of turnaround that I was able to do with lifestyle. And I just didn't have the time or the resources in the clinic to offer that. And that's what was a huge draw to me for Optavia, was because it was a program that worked. It includes the lifestyle component that makes it so important. And then it includes that coach support, because part of why I wasn't able to help as much as I wanted to in the clinic was there just wasn't time. And seeing people a few months later, you don't establish that same connection that you do as a coach. So I've been a coaching client for 5 years, absolutely love this plan, and will use it for the rest of my career.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So powerful. Sometimes we don't realize what's happening on the inside until we check, right?
Mm.
So that's awesome. And Donnie, I would love for you to share your story and just give everybody a little chance to know you better and how Optavia has really fit into what you do.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. After working 8 years in oncology nursing, I decided that I wanted to eradicate cancer off the face of the earth. Not only did I see the suffering that it caused for those fighting the disease, which I don't call them survivors, I call them warriors because that's what I know they are. And but I also saw the suffering that it caused for the family, and I feel like cancer just robs families of memories, and that like breaks my heart, and I have a holy hatred for it. And but the other part of it is that every time I walked into work, especially in the earlier years that I was working in oncology, I felt like I was visiting the, what is it, the ghost of Christmas future,
Mhm.
because everybody in my family was living the lifestyle that I saw that a lot of the people that I was helping were struggling with the problems, right? And I myself was struggling. I have struggled with my weight my entire life. And so by having the opportunity to serve people and developing this passion, I decided that I wanted to eradicate cancer for the world, but also for my family and for myself. It really ignited that passion. And I decided to go into pediatrics because I decided I was going to eradicate cancer from the crib on up, right? I was going to raise healthy children that would never get sick. And while I was doing that, I started the weight management program that you mentioned, and it was an uphill battle trying to get that thing off the ground. I was banging my head against the wall in every corner. I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, and everything that I thought that I wanted to do, fast forward to Optavia, I found what I was looking for. I found everything that I was wanting to help my kids with, right? But the best thing that could happen to me is that when I was running that weight management program, I delivered twins and I went on to gain 50 pounds after they were born. So after all of this passion and after all of this, wanting to help people be healthy and do a healthy lifestyle, I gained the 50 pounds, and it dawned on me that it doesn't matter what you know, it matters what you do. And I feel like Optavia bridged that gap from knowing to doing. Not only that, but I thought that just because I had twins, that I was exhausted, right? Because I had twins. But I know now that losing the weight increased my energy to navigate toddlers, because I started the program when my girls were about uh 6 months. And by the time they were 18 months and moving around, I was down a good 40 pounds, and I was able to run around with them, right? And so not only did it help me, but when I saw what was going on with me and that it had everything that I was looking for my weight management program for kids, I started helping others as a coach. And my very first client had type 2 diabetes, and she was 65 years old. And in her first month, she lost 15 pounds. Results not typical, whatever disclosures you want to put up there, right? She lost, the 65-year-old woman lost 15 pounds. And that in and of itself blew my mind. But then she reported to me that she saw her provider. And after losing those 15 pounds, her doctor took her off of insulin altogether and reduced her dose of metformin. And that blew my mind because I knew that was possible. I just had never been a part of it. And I became addicted to coaching and helping people create those kinds of results, because I realized that healthcare is actually managing disease. And as a coach, I discovered real healthcare where I could actually help people get healthy, and nothing gets me more excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love it. And confetti goes off when you say that. That's so cool. Well, we have some questions in the chat. Megan, I will start with you, but this is a great question. Lee was asking, how do I know my current level of metabolic health? Right? So how could
Great
someone,
question.
what are some ways that people could assess where they at in their metabolic health?
Yeah, there's a couple of very simple ways to assess where you are in your metabolic health. One of them may be asking your provider for some blood work, or also keeping in mind that a lot of the nationwide labs now, you can actually order your own blood work. If you go in there, if you do not have a primary provider, though I recommend you do. But a couple things to look at. One would be a lipid panel, which is a cholesterol panel. But you want the full lipid panel because you really want to see what your triglycerides are and also your HDL. So you want your triglycerides. The lab says less than 150, really less than 100 is much healthier than that. But also your HDL greater than 40 for men or 50 for women. You can look at, in addition to that, just a simple blood pressure reading can tell you a lot about your metabolic health. If that's elevated, that's a red flag. A simple waist circumference is another measure of metabolic health. And that's kind of a estimate of visceral fat, if you will. And so another way to assess that would be a body composition scan to take it a step further. And that would be to get a body composition and really take note of your visceral fat level, as well as your overall body fat and skeletal muscle mass. And with those components put together, you can get a pretty good idea of your metabolic health. To add one more thing, you may consider a fasting insulin level would be another great thing to look at for that. But the basics are the cholesterol, blood pressure, and waist circumference. Oh, and blood sugar, hemoglobin A1C, of course, or just a fasting blood glucose, although a hemoglobin A1C is a much better measure for that.
Awesome. That's so helpful, Megan. I love that, you gave some people some really simple at home things to do too, right?
Mhm.
A simple body composition scan can give you some great insight and a waist circumference,
Mhm.
um, that's fabulous. Donnie, I'll pass the next question on to you. So Bonnie was asking, how does menopause affect, our health, our weight, stress, sleep? I mean, I think this is something that affects a lot of women, and there's so many questions about that. I think a lot of times women are not given a lot of hope in those perimenopausal, menopausal years. So, what how does that affect their health, and how does that relate to metabolic health?
Well, one of my favorite things that I hear from my clients, especially women that are over the age of 40, they're like, well, I'm over the age of 40 and thinking perimenopause, menopause, and I'm never going to be whatever weight they want to be. And then all of a sudden they're there and they're like, whoa, right? And so we are absolutely able to help, right? But what happens in menopause is that estrogen levels drop. And estrogen helps direct fat storage, right? And before estrogen levels drop, it's directing it to all the right places. And once we don't have enough of those estrogen directing traffic, if you will, um, it starts collecting in the abdomen. And so, as Megan was just talking about, that visceral adiposity, it starts collecting there, right? And so that contributes to affecting the metabolic health. Now, a lot of times women have a hard time sleeping at night, hot flashes and so forth. That interrupted sleep contributes to elevated cortisol levels, and all of the hormones just play a role on us women, right? Is there anything else that you would add to that, Megan? Because I did pediatrics, right? I didn't deal with much menopause in that population.
I think that was a great answer. So I won't expound on that anymore because there's a bunch of great questions in the chat, but I think you gave a great answer to that. And my bottom line is it affects it a lot. The
Perfect.
question was, how does menopause affect it? A lot? It really does.
And
Um,
I think the new research that Optavia has done to show that we can target visceral fat is so powerful, right?
yeah,
So that increased weight we tend to develop around the midsection, the weight in itself can create hormonal disruption, inflammation, and all of those things. So the fact that we are targeting that visceral belly fat with our program is very, very powerful.
yeah.
So.
That's actually exactly what I wanted to go to next, Mike, unless you were going to segue to
No,
something
go
else,
ahead.
because
Yeah,
there's a couple great questions in the chat about that. One of the questions is, how dangerous is visceral fat? I hate to be an alarmist, and we always want to, make changes based on what we want, not what we don't want. But visceral fat is extremely dangerous. There's really no sugarcoating it. It is the type of fat that increases inflammation throughout our body. It's really interesting. When we have that body fat in the midsection where it starts to collect in and around the organs, that's visceral fat. It acts like its own organ. It is metabolically active. It doesn't just sit there as other, tissue. it is metabolically active. It's constantly sending off these inflammatory cytokines throughout our whole body. So we want to do everything that we can to reduce that visceral fat. And a question in the chat here, I'm going to combine three of them into a succinct answer. But one of them was, how soon can you see that visceral fat starting to move? Well, actually, right before this conversation here, I just saw two patients that have been on the 5-in-1 program, 5-in-1 active, and one was on 4 and 2-in-1. 1 month exactly. They just came back in for their repeat InBody scan. They both lost a point in visceral fat already. So, you know, within weeks to 1 month, on a structured eating plan like Optavia that's low in sugar and creates this mild ketosis, we see results pretty quickly with that. And then along those lines too, there was another question about the visceral fat, and the question was from Cinda in the chat saying, you know, okay, I've got X number of pounds that I still want to lose here. Now I'm looking at all these factors on the body composition scale. How do I make sense of all of these factors? How do I use this information to guide my next steps? And my best advice for that is to kind of like get rid of the whole I need X number of pounds to lose, right? Because that comes from a very Optavia 2.0 mentality where we're only focused on weight. When you've got all those other numbers, I would focus on getting your body fat down to a healthy range, which is different for men and women, getting your visceral fat down to a healthy range, and just trying to stay as strong as you can. Keep that skeletal muscle mass either steady while you're losing fat or going up if you can. And then really just focus on the body fat and the visceral fat and let your goals revolve around that. It becomes a lot more fun that way too.
Yeah, that's so good.
Can I
Oh,
jump
go
on
ahead.
that
Yeah.
real quick? You know, I love that we're talking about the visceral fat and fat percentages and all of that versus just the BMI, right? We're moving away from that because the BMI, we've been relying too heavily on that. And that does not give us as much information as the fat and the visceral, the waist circumference, all of that is more important than just the BMI alone.
Yeah. You know, there was a question, either one of you can field this, that, you know, a lot, someone's probably referencing like using their InBody, or maybe they have an at-home body composition scan, and it talks about total muscle mass versus skeletal muscle mass. And they were asking a question, what is the difference between total muscle mass and skeletal muscle mass? So there, I think, yeah, Susan, what is the difference between the percent of muscle mass and skeletal muscle?
Do you want to answer that one, Megan? Do you?
Well, the skeletal muscle, and actually, Dr. Mike, you may have even a better
Yeah.
answer to this as a chiropractor, but the skeletal muscle is the muscle that's holding our bones together.
Yeah.
And there are other types of muscle throughout the body to just help our body function that is not skeletal muscle.
Yeah. So there are different names of muscle. There's cardiac muscle, there's smooth muscle, there's skeletal muscle. So we're specifically referencing the skeletal muscle, which is the main muscles that are moving the systems, you know, the skeletal structure of our body, right? So that's really all it is, right? So when we think of muscle, I think in a general sense, we think of all of it being the same, but there are different types of muscle within your body. And so really what we have the most influence over is our skeletal muscle level, right? That's what you can go to a gym. You can use essential amino acids. I saw a question about EAA stimulating muscle protein synthesis. Essentially what that means is our aminos are formulated in a way where it actually stimulates that process. So TJ was asking that. And it enhances your body's ability by just providing it everything it needs in the right ratios to stimulate muscle growth, right? Which is muscle is the driver of our metabolic system. So that is very, very important. But you know, people were asking some questions about getting body scans, right? You know, you can just Google like something like InBody scan near me or DEXA scan near me, but there are at home scales that you can use that are very effective. Donnie, I wanted to reference something with you because you did spend some time in oncology, and I think sometimes people miss the connection between medical or metabolic health and cancer. And I think that, just being in that field, you could maybe connect those for people.
Well, what happens is that when your metabolism is not healthy, it creates the perfect environment for cancer cells to thrive. And we don't want that. We don't want those cancer cells to thrive. With chronic inflammation, inflammation is the precursor to most disease, right? Including cancer. Um, and the excess visceral fat. Now, this is the thing is that as Megan was talking about, the fat is metabolically active, right? And it creates an environment where cancer thrives, but it's not just in obesity that cancer thrives, because we know that you don't have to be obese to be metabolically unhealthy. And especially breast cancers and colon cancers can be related to not weight related metabolic dysfunction. Does that make sense? There's many, many cancers. I think it's like over 13 of them that are related, are weight related, but breast and colon is specifically, they've noticed are not related necessarily to weight, or they can grow even if weight is not a factor.
Hmm. Yeah, which is a great um, way of seeing that you could be at an ideal weight and still have metabolic dysfunction. I recently did an in-body scan on someone who was 130 pounds but was 48% body fat, right? So this person they're under muscled, right? So they are literally obese even though their weight is normal because they're so under muscled. But we've had some questions about NASH and how long does it take to reverse that. Maybe for some people, what even is NASH? But we know that it is a growing concern in America. And Megan, I thought maybe you could give some people some insight with that.
Yeah, so NASH stands for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And it's actually been renamed, if you will, now. It's now called MASH, metabolic associated steatohepatitis. So it's like a hardening of the liver tissue that over time can lead to scarring that does become irreversible. And so, how long does it take? Well, it depends on the severity, right? How many of the cells are undergoing this kind of abnormal metabolic associated dysfunction. But what I would say is, our body wants to heal, right? And these things can heal. So rather than looking at the big scope of how long is it going to take to go away completely, just know that as you treat your body well and you give your body exactly what it needs, keep your blood sugar balanced, get all the nutrition that you need, your body will slowly start to heal. And so rather than looking at, one big end result, when is it finally gone? Just really keep in mind that actually with each meal, with each day, your body is healing.
Yes. Yeah, so good. And it is one of the fastest growing conditions, um, unfortunately, right? And affecting more and more people. I think, Donnie, we talked yesterday that you were seeing when you were working in pediatrics with your weight loss program for children, we're seeing fatty liver start to develop in young kids now.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that drove my passion is I had kids come in and think that it was just expected because it was family history of, diabetes or liver disease or whatever it was. Since it's in the family, they just expected there was no way around it. They were going to tackle it too. And I was like, oh, no, no, no. But I have my college roommate is also a nurse, and she worked on a liver transplant unit. And she said that this is the primary driver of the entire unit. You think of liver disease a lot of times related to alcohol. That's why it's called non-alcoholic, before the switch, because it's the disease in the liver that is not related to alcohol, right? And she said that that is what kind of funded the entire unit. That's what kept it going, was those that came in without alcohol-related liver disease.
Yeah. So it is really important, I've heard statistics recently where somewhere between 60 to 67% of the nutritional diet in America is ultra processed foods, which are leading to a lot of these problems. So there have been a few questions about subcutaneous fat and visceral fat, and kind of the difference of those two. Megan, maybe you want to step into that a little bit and just maybe develop a little more understanding of the two.
Sure, yeah, the subcutaneous fat is the fat that's just right under the skin. So in this picture, if you're watching live, it's the lighter pink color. So it's more towards the surface of the skin. I did see a question in the chat if somebody had an in-body or some kind of a result, probably wasn't in-body, that showed subcutaneous fat is 0, but the visceral fat was high. That probably is a misread because we all have subcutaneous fat. So the difference there is that's kind of the stuff on the exterior, that you can pinch or you can see or might fold over your jeans a little bit. But it's the deeper visceral fat that's actually more inflammatory than the subcutaneous fat.
Yeah, awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. What amazing. And for everybody that was putting questions in the chat and putting questions in the Q&A, thank you so much. We love having the opportunity to sit here. Megan and Donnie, thank you so much for bringing your expertise with us, along tonight. So we have like a minute here, and I just thought we would talk something about Thanksgiving, the holiday. I know that has a big impact on people's health. You want to go first, Megan? I know you kind of have had some.
Oh, well, there was something in the chat that I think some people do find very important. So I just want to bring this up one time, is that with these bioelectrical impedance scales, it is recommended that people with implantable devices like pacemakers or defibrillators not use one of those scales. And that's simply because those devices are so sensitive that it may actually interpret that little bit of electricity as a cardiac arrhythmia. So probably it's not going to cause any big problems, but if you do have a pacemaker or a defibrillator, it is not recommended to use a scale like that. So you can talk to your provider about getting a DEXA scan or reach out directly to your device manufacturer. They may give you the A-OK to use a scale, but we're certainly not going to do that here.
Yeah, awesome. So any tips or advice, guys, as we head into maybe one of the biggest holidays of the year that is really designed around food?
One of the things that helps me, especially when I'm tempted with certain foods, is just to remember what's going on the inside. And so as I was listening to these talks, right, I was remembering what really matters to me. And in Thanksgiving, I want to be grateful for the things that really matter to me. And the people are what matter to me, and the memories are what matter to me, and I want to make more of them. And so as I focus on that, it kind of informs the decisions that I make in terms of what I'm going to be eating. One thing that I heard today that it was on one of these calls, was that sugar is fuel for food noise, right? And so if you happen to be like me and have that food noise in your ear, then that's something that I also consider going into the holidays, is that I'm going to choose the beast I'm going to feed, right? And I'm going to feed the healthy one.
That is great advice. Thank you so much. Well, we will be back here again next week, and for another episode of Let's Talk. And we are going to continue this conversation about metabolic health. And next week will be the metabolic reset, what's in it for you. Now, remember, all of these Let's Talk episodes are on our YouTube channel. They're on our podcast. So, yes, go back, re-listen to them, share them with family and friends. And I couldn't agree more with what Donnie said. Let's focus on the people and getting to spend time with them and just be in this spirit of gratitude through this holiday season. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks again, Megan and Donnie. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Right.